La vie est un grand voyage, j'ai envie de vivre et lire, délivrer de ces illusions, ce que toi et moi vivions. La vie est un grand voyage.
But thank you, Sharon. I appreciate the opportunity to share the Coco Republic case study, especially with regards to our journey with outsourcing to Fiji. And thank you everyone else for attending. It's good to see a large number of people here today. As Sharon mentioned, my name is Steve White. I'm the Head of Customer Service for Coco Republic. My responsibilities mostly relate to the after sales responsibilities with regards to Coco Republic. Prior to me joining Coco Republic, I was the Customer Experience Manager for Samsung. So I have had quite a bit of experience in outsourcing to the Philippines with regards to BPO. And more recently, prior to Coco, I was also managing the customer service for a company called AMP Control, which is an Australian electrical safety manufacturer for the mining and infrastructure industry. Now, due to limited time, I've obviously limited what I can say to you today to get through, but I am looking forward to the Q&A session towards the end of the schedule today. So if there's any questions that you wish to ask, then please feel free, and I'm only too happy to answer. Now, with regards to Coco Republic, it's not my intention in turning this into a sales pitch, so I do apologise, but this is probably the one slide and the one section that I will talk a little bit about Coco Republic, just to help provide a little bit of context as to who we are and therefore what we were looking for in an outsourced BPO. So from a history perspective, Coco Republic is a high-end aspirational furniture brand that's been evolving from some very humble Australian beginnings back in 1979 as a family company. Only recently has that become an international brand. We have 15 stores across Australia and New Zealand, and recently we opened a store in the US, which is in the California region, and there are plans to open more stores within the US region as well. Just to give an understanding of who we are, and you may get a little bit of that from the backgrounds that I'm going to share with you today, but you don't actually shop in a store with Coco Republic. And I know a lot of this is about language, but you visit a showroom. And you don't shop at Coco, you have an experience with Coco. And that's the intent with regards to how we manage our customer service. So we have dedicated design professionals that help you navigate the way through the showrooms, and their intention is to find those sought after pieces that make a statement in your home. So while visiting a showroom, we provide you with coffee, snacks, cakes, etc., which are usually from our in-house cafe, so that the whole, I'm going to use that word, shopping experience is a genuine experience. So I guess the reason I'm here today is with relation to the challenges that we were facing with regards to Coco Republic. So our challenge itself was really quite simple. We were struggling to translate the showroom experience into an after sales experience. So what you saw in the showroom, or how you participated in the showroom, was a very different experience after sale. Our deficiency was mostly associated with labour, and in particular not having the right labour. So we weren't dissimilar to many organisations within Australia. Since the COVID-19 pandemic and the closure of our borders, things were very difficult with regards to the Australian labour market. In addition to that, we were also caught up in I suppose, the home renovation boom that took place as a result of COVID-19. And we've been unable to attract staff and also unable to maintain existing staff, which was the problem that we were facing, and probably very similar problems that you guys are facing. And although it's a very nice problem to have, and you know, whenever you think of running a business, you always want your order book to be bigger than what you're capable of supplying, and that's definitely was the case. However, that also has its own problems, that if you're unable to supply through your customer service or your labour force, then that can also relate to a dramatic reduction in the experience, which then can also relate to a reduction in revenue as well. So it was that knife edge of being, having a really good problem to have, but we needed to solve it. So we were under a lot of pressure. We needed resources, we needed the right resources, and we needed the resources fairly quickly. So that being the case, we had to embark on a search to find those resources. It wasn't a case of a nice to have or maybe we will. We had to. We were in that position. We also had to think outside the box in finding the staffing solutions. It wasn't a case of just sitting around a table and getting a new agency on board. We'd exhausted most of the agencies. We'd exhausted most of the channels by which you would normally resource labour. So we needed to find a group of people that had the same degree of passion that we had with regards to customer service. So we're looking for people that had that customer service gene and that could really take that customer experience from the showroom and translate that into our after-sales customer service. One of the other challenges associated with that search was also that many organisations, such as the banking, energy, telecommunications sectors, they'd also made a big push just before COVID to bring their contact centres back on shore. And they were telling everyone about it. Every second ad you saw on TV was telling us that in order to provide high quality levels of customer service, you had to have your customer service team in Australia. And they were setting the community up for needing to have customer service within Australia. So we had two major problems associated with that. One was the pool of candidates. So the pool of candidates was getting smaller and smaller, including the competition was getting higher and higher. And the community was being conditioned that good governance and quality of customer service was only found through onshore contact centres. So we really were up against it, and I'm assuming many of the people that are joining us today were also up against those same sorts of difficulties. So we needed to find staff quickly, and we also needed to consider costs of onshore sourcing. So what we're also experiencing with onshore or direct employment was that it was almost like an auction. So when it came to finding staff members, you could make an offer in the morning, but by the afternoon, that candidate also had another 2 or 3 offers, and it was almost like a silent auction type scenario when trying to find staff members, and that became incredibly frustrating. And what resources we did have were taken up in finding resources. So it was a very difficult circumstance. So in considering where we were at, we had to consider many different locations, many different regions. And in our research, we didn't just go straight to CDM, of course. We did our due diligence and went to many other organisations as well in searching for those different organisations. But we did come across CDM, and we came across Fiji, and it was a very, I'm going to say, pleasant surprise. It wasn't something that was on my radar. It was certainly something that came to me as a left field choice and was therefore very much outside of the box, which is where I suppose our thinking was aiming towards anyway. And in Fiji, and I think Chris has already mentioned this, but English is one of the primary languages. It's one of the primary language for business, government, the education sector. The accent from the Fijian people is a very neutral accent. So it doesn't carry that negative stigma that would often be the case when you're dealing with a call centre in the likes of the Philippines or India or somewhere of that nature. So that was also very pleasing as well. And one of the things that I suppose was fortuitous from our perspective is that with COVID-19, the Fijian tourism industry, whilst difficult for Fiji, it was shattered. And as a result of that being shattered, there was a large number of resources with extensive experience in customer service that were very much underutilised. So when we started looking into Fiji, we started getting very excited about the potential pool of candidates that we could draw on to solve this challenge that we were experiencing. And Chris has also mentioned this as well, but we needed a location that wasn't restrictive for us to train or to manage the team. And that was probably 2 main areas. One was the internet quality. Given that COVID-19 was still a very real thing, we needed to make sure that we had the electronic infrastructure capable of making sure that we could actually do business together. So that was very important, as well as the time zone. So time zone, although probably not the most critical factor, when you're dealing with very limited staff members who have to perform the training, it was very important to make sure that our business day was closely aligned with our partner's business day, which made it a lot easier to do comprehensive training, both for the trainers and the trainees. So it allowed us to do Teams and Zoom without too much disruption. And Chris also mentioned it before, but Fiji is only about 4 to 4.5 hours flying time from Sydney. It doesn't require any visas or restrictions to enter the country. So it was also very simple and very easy that should we need to make a visit, we could do so quite easily and readily. And transport and accommodation within Fiji is also not restrictive or prohibitive. So it was very easy to make a visit and do everything we needed to do. And Chris has also mentioned it. It looks like he's stealing a lot of my thunder. Is that it's also a very relaxing place to take advantage of the local culture. And I did have the very great opportunities to take advantage of a day or so before flying back home when I did my initial visit as well. So I suppose that left the question that once we'd made the decision that Fiji was the location for us, we then had to look at the speed of implementation. We were very fortunate that CDM were able to move very quickly to propose the documentation and the offering. CDM were also very available for questions and conversations as necessary. And they're both flexible and responsive. We did have a lot of questions. And like most people, you dive into these sorts of things and you realise a lot of the questions after you've signed the document. But we certainly had a lot of questions before the document, and CDM were very, very flexible and responsive in helping us answer those questions and making sure that the decision to move to Fiji was going to be the right one for us. The agreements that were proposed for us were structured in very lay terms. So I was used to some very long, drawn-out negotiations when dealing with a lot of the Philippines contact centres, but CDM made that whole process very simple, very easy, and it was very quick as far as the negotiations were concerned. And the whole process from the point at which, we'd requested a proposal to the point at which we were able to genuinely move forward probably took about a fortnight. And it was a fairly intense fortnight, but it only took us about a fortnight to get to that point. One of the other major considerations, and I did touch on it earlier, was with relation to the budget and the pricing. So the Fijian labour laws are, from what I can understand, fairly similar to the Australian labour laws as far as overtime and hours capable of being worked, etc. However, the cost is significantly lower, and that was one of the attractive components in addition to the ones I've mentioned before, is that we were in a position where we were able to budget up to 2 Fijian employees for the price of 1 Australian employee. So that allowed us not just simply to maintain our existing employment, it actually gave us a great opportunity to expand our operation that we currently had, and not just maintain that status quo. So other regions did offer better pricing, and we were able to get that through the likes of Philippines, India, etc. But the quality wasn't there. And I mentioned it before about the accent and the stigma associated with some accents. And we made the commercial decision that in order for it to be fitting with our brand, the Fijian accent and the Fijian culture was very much aligned with where we needed to be, and therefore was something that we could outsource to. We also had to look at governance. Coco Republic prides itself on being a responsible corporate citizen, and we needed to make sure that we weren't breaching any moral or regulatory obligations, especially with regard to the more recent modern slavery laws that have come into Australia. CDM were very forthcoming and cooperative with all of the information required to satisfy our legal, moral and community obligations with regards to governance. So they were very helpful in providing all of the information that we needed to satisfy our organisation that we weren't taking our business to an operation that was going to jeopardise our brand moving forward. And CDM and Coco appeared to be well aligned in all of our approach with regards to governance and the way in which we need to manage our team's labour and the respect required for that, etc. So in realising the headcount and the speed to deployment, we were nervous about quite a few things. And I've mentioned before that I've had quite a few years' experience in contact centres, especially via the Philippines region. And we were nervous about the selection criteria of staff and the speed of recruitment to training. So, of course, we'd been made all of the promises that typically a BPO will make you about the quality of staff, the speed of engagement, etc. We were also welcomed to participate in the recruitment process. I personally interviewed every staff member and was given that opportunity, and many of those were through individual interviews if we were looking at team leads or supervisors, etc., and also group interviews where we were looking for larger numbers of team members to join the team. So we had the right of veto and the opportunity to gauge the suitability for those staff members. And in our circumstance, and I know circumstances may be different for other organisations, but we required the outsourcing team to use our systems and infrastructure. So we controlled the training and we were able to get all of the statistics and information that we required for reporting and performance, etc. So, and even when it came to training, what that also meant is that most of the training was, I suppose, held and responsible by us. And we required, obviously, them to use our systems. And what we found was that the candidates were often available and ready prior to us having our systems and accesses ready for the candidates. So that was, again, one of those problems you love to have, that the BPO is actually waiting on us rather than us waiting on the BPO. The average time from the point at which we identified a need for recruitment to the point at which we were onboarding was approximately 7 days. Team lead supervisors may have been a little bit longer, but as far as the normal headcount with regards to our customer service agents, it was approximately 7 days, give or take. We're also nervous about the stereotype of Fiji time, and I'd previously holidayed in Fiji with the family. Many people within the organisation had done the same thing, and it's one thing to experience Fiji and for everyone to be on Fiji time when you're in a holiday resort, but when you've got customers that are screaming at you and need the phones answered or need their emails responded to, we couldn't afford to be in a position where Fiji time was the culture that we were buying ourselves into. So we were very pleased to find that when we were going through the interview process and we were onboarding people, that we actually found that stereotypical Fiji time scenario was not present at all. We actually had a lot of our candidates that were very strong candidates, had very strong work ethics, were very committed to the organisation and very committed to our brand, and very quickly committing to our brand. I'm not going to suggest that absenteeism or attrition wasn't present. It is, and just like managing most contact centres, you do need to have a fairly ruthless attitude that if the team member isn't performing where you need them to perform, you need to cycle those team members out and get someone else in who is capable. CDM were very supportive of that need, and as I say, we had the right of veto there with regards to our team members. But we also found that the absenteeism and the attrition that we experienced wasn't outside of what you would consider to be an acceptable region, and it was actually marginally better than what we're finding in our Sydney team. So we were all very, very pleasantly surprised with what we're experiencing there. I did briefly touch on the culture. So the culture within CDM and the candidates they provided was very similar to the culture within our Sydney team and our Sydney operation. And that is very much, I suppose, Fiji is also what I consider a fairly Christian country. So therefore, I suppose the general morals within the community are also fairly similar as well. And the teams have all been very respectful, very hardworking and very driven, which is the culture that we were looking for within our organisation. And we like to reward our team members within Coco Republic, and I'm fairly confident that we've rewarded the team members that joined for CDM in Fiji, but we've also been rewarded. We've been rewarded by some very reliable and committed team members that all share a common goal within our organisation, within CDM. So we do feel that this arrangement that we have is very much a mutually beneficial arrangement, and it is very much aligned on a very similar work ethic and also outside of work. And we are developing some strong friendships and relationships between the team members in our Sydney office as well as the team members in the Fiji office, which is very pleasing to see. If I was to move to our performance, the recruitment process we took on landed us with a number of supervisors and team leaders that are of a very high quality, and that was one of the most important things that we needed to align ourselves with. Although the agents, yes, it's very important to have agents that are aligned. You needed to have your middle management, your team leaders and supervisors very much aligned with where we were, because ultimately they are going to be the people that are going to drive the agents to perform. So we were very fortunate that we were able to secure some high quality team leads and supervisors. And the performance levels that we received from those team members actually lends itself to further growth within CDM. We actually found that in undertaking that project, the supervisors actually were outperforming some of our Sydney or Australian team members. So that was very pleasing to see. So that allowed us to then, I suppose, invoke further growth. So since taking on CDM, and it's only been a very short journey in a handful of months, we've actually more than doubled our intended workforce within Fiji, because we were so pleasantly surprised with what we were seeing. And when we were managing attrition through our Sydney office, we were actually not even taking the opportunity to re-employ within Sydney. We were immediately going to Fiji, knowing that the quality of candidates were definitely what we required in Sydney or better. So that was very promising. I am going to share a couple of performance slides. Unfortunately, just for, I suppose, I'm not going to say privacy reasons for want of a better term, but I can't show actual numbers, but I did want to be able to show some of the glide paths that we embarked on with some of our main criteria or main KPIs, just to give you guys a bit of an understanding as to the success of the operation. So if I was to look at
1 minute, Steve. Sorry, we just got 1 minute.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was my cowbell. I'll hurry up.
Yeah.
So you can see there from the open caseload, we've actually reduced the open caseload to a quarter of where we started from when using CDM. And anecdotally, we also are receiving very strong reports from our showrooms and our customers that they're also seeing the same reduction in noise to the same proportion. Our response times with regards to electronic emails or electronic means, we also found that actually reduced by a quarter as well, response time. So that was a very promising outcome. And also the age to close inquiries. The age to close inquiries is halved. It wasn't quite at the same trajectory as being a quarter, but it's very promising to see that we actually halved those response times. Those closure times. So I'll just jump forward, given that I've probably only got 30 seconds or less. The learnings, we did have quite a few learnings out of the experience, but the biggest takeaway or the biggest learning is that we were less prepared than what CDM were. Now, I've had a lot of experience, as I mentioned, in outsourcing with BPOs, but we still fell into that same trap that we, I suppose, fell short in our documentation, the scripting and the detailing of the required outcomes. And one of the biggest things I would suggest as an outcome that we really need to learn for next time is that we still need to be very prescriptive. We fell into that trap thinking, well, everyone sounds like us, everyone's got the same attitude as us, everyone's got the same culture as us. However, you still need to be very prescriptive with an outsource organisation because they are coming off the base of knowing very little. They don't experience your organisation. They haven't necessarily experienced your industry. So you need to be very prescriptive in what you provide them and the information that they need. And given the travel between Sydney and Fiji, I'd suggest that you do travel as often as your budget may allow you to. We found that the visitations were very promising to being able to provide us even further growth within our performance. I've only got quickly 2 more. So overall, the whole process we see as being a resounding success, and our future strategic plans have been created with CDM in mind, and we see it as being a very long-term relationship, including both the front of house and the back office administration. So I apologise, I've taken more than what I should have, but I thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to share our case study, and I look forward to any questions that any of you may have later on in the schedule.